Hi, Jules Bless Vegan, and as always, welcome to my channel. And for those who are new, I hope you can benefit. So today is Good Friday, and I was really fortunate. I went to my parish, and we're in the high desert, so it's about 96 degrees. And usually, or in my experience, when you do the Stations of the Cross, which are the 14 stations from Jesus being condemned to death all the way to being placed in the tomb. And often, I will say, in the parish, everybody just goes from station to station within the parish. And today at this church, they actually had the stations outside and they were around the perimeter of the church. So it was about 96 degrees, and some of the stations were on asphalt, some of them were in rock, and people were asked to kneel at each station, and I didn't. And I felt kind of bad. I wondered, like, are people thinking, that girl's young enough, she's able enough? Because there were elderly who were kneeling. And even people were there in wheelchairs. There were little children that their moms were holding, and even a mom with a baby was kneeling. And I had to just kind of hope that God would understand and not be concerned about the people around me. And what it was is that I just didn't feel confident enough to be able to kneel in those various settings and get up. And that wasn't just arrogance. Part of it is fear, because I've been so much heavier at times and it's very difficult for me to get up. But what it did was it just affirmed to me my desire to just keep getting stronger, to keep losing the weight, to keep rebounding, which is giving me strength. But I've missed several days of rebounding because of my urinary tract infection, which, because I opted not to take any antibiotics, is still just trying to conclude. And I think it's been almost 2 weeks. I did rebound the other day, but it was really difficult in my body. So my affirmation is that next year I am in fantastic shape and very strong and more than confident in being able to kneel. I did kneel on the floor in the church, but that's because I had the support of the pew if I needed it, and I think that's okay. I mean, it's never about God, but it's the image around people and wanting to witness to them. Anyway, forgive me, I'm having terrible allergies as usual. I cannot breathe, but I wanted to go through some of these stations, and if you're not familiar, please just look them up. Just put in Stations of the Cross, it'll come up immediately. So, yes, first Jesus was condemned to death, which is horrific, and I'm so sorry and completely unjust. But the next part is he carries his cross, and the thing for Jesus, he'd already been beaten, so all of his skin is completely raw. This is not the beautiful, smooth crosses that we see that are shellacked and lovely. It's a beam of a piece of wood that probably had splinters too, that he's putting on that raw shoulder and back. And then, of course, he's in that same situation. People are surrounding him, they're spitting, they're yelling, they're horrific. And he's trying to carry that crossbeam. And inevitably, station number 3, he falls for the first time. And the other thing was, because they had mocked him, they jammed a crown of thorns. And if you've ever been, stabbed by a rose bush or anything, it's painful, let alone into your forehead and head. So he has that crown of thorns also piercing his head. And so when he fell, inevitably that thorns are, shoving right into him even more. But he's able to get up. Then finally he sees his mother. A lot of times when we get hurt, we don't want to concern our mothers. I don't know if that's true for you, but I know little kids are like, please don't tell my mom, because my mom will get even more upset than me. Like, so often, I think of when I watch toddlers and they fall and they don't even think to cry until the mother goes, oh, and then they go, oh, God, like, am I really hurt? Because it affected my mother. And here's his mother. And the difference with Jesus was that because he is a universal child of the world, all brothers, all sisters, all mothers, he had to look at his mother and say, Mom, I'm going about my Father's business again. When he was a little kid, when he got lost on their 3-day trek from Jerusalem, he was hanging out with the elders telling stories and asking questions, it took 3 days in a caravan of insanity for his mother to find him. And he was just like, hello, I'm going about my father's business. Well, she's with Joseph, his stepdad. But okay, the father's business? And here he is saying, I know you're so upset and so sad, Mom, but I gotta keep going. It must have just been insane. She loved him so much. And then finally, Simon of Cyrene in Station 5. Simon was just a good guy going about his day, and they just ripped him from the crowd and said, you're going to help carry that cross. He didn't want to be associated per se because, they thought he was a Jesus lover. Like so many, he'd be killed. But Jesus also had to be humble enough to say, I have all the power in the universe. I could bust out of this right now. But I'm in a human body, and I'm going to accept the limitations of a human body and allow this person to help me. How often do we not want help? Like we want it, but we won't ask for it. Or people offer help and we say no. A lot of times when I tell people, oh, I'm going to pray for you, they immediately say, no, don't pray for me. And certainly don't pray for me yet. Like it's not that bad. Don't pray for me. Praying is a first resort for me, not a last. And there's a lot of beauty in being able to accept the grace of allowing people to help us, and to, when God calls us unexpectedly, step up and say yes. Number 6 is Veronica wiping the face of Jesus, and the importance of our acceptance of others, even when they don't look like us, even when it's a little scary. A lot of times people around me will say, Juliana, why are you talking to that person? You don't know that person. That person's a weirdo. And I'm like, I just saw someone in need, right? 1 second. And it didn't occur to me at all to not approach them. I can't talk about the number of times where I've given money, and it may have just been the change in my purse because I don't have money, but just the rest of the change in my pocket. And I remember this one guy, I must have been the only person who smiled all day. And he said, well, thank you for your beautiful smile. He was so surprised that while I was giving that money, I was smiling. And of course it made me giggle. But if the least you can do is give a smile and make people feel at peace in that moment, isn't that great? So many gifts God gives us are completely free, and that is one of them. So here's Veronica. It's against the law for women to touch men. She's risking her life. But she can't be concerned about the people around her. She can only see the end goal, which is to comfort this man for one moment by wiping his face. And then Jesus falls for the second time. He's exhausted. He's in insane pain. And he falls again. Well, how many times in our life are we exhausted? When are we in so much pain? I know a lot of you have had a lot of pain in your life. I know I have. Oh my goodness. It's interesting though. I'm only in pain in the moment. You know what I mean? It was funny. I went and got, what is it called when you get waxed, but everywhere? I can't think of what that's called. A French wax? No. Anyway, something. But I went and did it. And I got my legs waxed. I got my privates waxed. I got everything waxed. And there was a bunch of people outside of that room. And when I came out, they all looked like they had to pick their chins up off the floor. And they said, how much did that hurt? And I thought, you know what? It only hurt when she ripped, but not in between the ripping, which was interesting. The pain was insane for the moment, but it's much like giving birth, right? I mean, leading up to it, the aches, the pains, all of it, the contractions, the breathing, the pushing, it's all insane. But when it's done, it's done. So I was just thinking, we're going to fall. We're going to fall many times in our life. The grace is getting back up and trusting the process. And here Jesus is falling again. And after he falls the second time, he comes upon women who are crying and wailing. They're actually professional mourners, is what it says. They are professional mourners. And Jesus, not shaming them, he takes a moment to say, women, don't worry about me. I am handled. You need to worry about you. There's going to come a day when you would have wished to have been barren and never even had children, to never have a child suckle your breast. Like, the world is going so dark that you will have wished you never even gave birth. Well, you can imagine the shock of that. I mean, these are professional mourners. They didn't expect anything profound coming their way. But I get that. It's like sometimes what I find, and I don't mean to be cold, but when I go to funerals and go to different things, so often what people are crying about is not the person who's gone. They're crying for themselves for the loss. They're crying maybe for the circumstance in which that person died. But they're usually crying for what wasn't and what won't be, right? And that's the real loss, especially if they have any faith and they know that that person's handled in the next life. So then Jesus falls again, a third time. Simon's helping the best he can, but that darn beam weighs so much and people are spitting and yelling and screaming and the streets are full and there's barely room for the crossbeam. And he falls again, having all the power in the universe. He could totally wipe out everybody in one breath, but he keeps saying, no, I'm going to witness through this. So in a way, it's kind of funny, but that gives me courage on trying to change my way of eating, trying to witness to a better way, not falling again, not giving into the food again, but saying, you know what, I made it. I made it through this. How does God keep blessing me with grace? And oh my gosh, I didn't expect it, but it's going to make me cry because how does God continue to heal me and fix my numbers and just in every way show me his grace of saying, I am doing it all, Juliana. I have every intention for you to stay off dialysis, to stay out of hospitals, to be well. What are you doing? And it's like, wow, Father, your loving grace is so unbelievably outstanding. I want the courage to say yes to life. I want the courage to say yes to wellness. And for today, praise God, I did. Okay, so I get up each time, right? Oh my gosh, I've been so abused. I've been raped. I've had back surgery. I was burned in an accident. I've been in car accidents. I've been in so many things, and I get up. Maybe he appreciates that I get up. But I give it all to him. My ability to smile and giggle and laugh and love people as they are, I give it all to him. So it's a mutual blessing, right? And then Jesus is stripped of his clothes, actually naked, which is like so humiliating, but so awful, especially in their tradition where you were supposed to stay covered, right? Even covering your head out of respect for God. And he's stripped of his clothes in front of everybody. And the insanity of being nailed to a cross, being pierced in that pain. Again, I accidentally stabbed my hand yesterday. When I was working in my classroom, I punctured my palm. Not even the beginning of the insanity of those nails being nailed through his palms and feet. But I know what it's like, the shock of being pierced, and it's still hurting today. But wow. And finally, to die. It was merciful that he only lived for 3 hours. It was unheard of, which is why the soldier had to pierce his side to see if he really was dead or faking it as if, right? But usually it took 2 or 3 days. That's why they even broke the knees of those on the crosses so that their lungs would essentially suffocate them from the weight. And they didn't have to do that for Jesus. He was gone in 3 hours. And then taken down from that cross, it's so interesting. Everything in Jesus' life was borrowed, really, right? He even told all of his apostles and everybody to just show up in just your cloak and sandals and trust that you'll be provided for, and that if no one provides for you, move on to the next home. And so for Jesus, there was this man, I want to say Joseph of Arimathea, and he was a fairly wealthy man, not necessarily a follower of Christ. He was like a secret follower of Christ, right? Because he was a Jew, and I think he may have even been part of the Sanhedrin, but he respected and secretly followed Christ. So he asked for Jesus's body when Jesus died, and he had a tomb that Jesus could use. And so he was there when Jesus was taken down from the cross, a Joseph when Jesus was taken from the cross, a borrowed tomb where Jesus was laid on straw, right? Well, let's go back to his birth. His stepfather was Joseph. It was a borrowed manger, right? Laid down in all of that grass with the animals. Like, it's such an interesting parallel, right? This little baby in straw in a manger, a borrowed place for birth, a borrowed place for death. It kind of just reminds us we're just passing through. I often have a sense of that, and there's nothing more freeing than to let go when we think we possess things. Like when I was cleaning my room, I didn't possess those things. I saved what I could for my students. I took some things that were mine and I left other things for the next teacher and arranged all of it for her so she would be handled, presuming it's a woman, I don't know, upon starting. And it was total grace for me to continuously want to let go of that room and to set it up the best I could to welcome that new person coming and make sure they were handled. And finally, yeah, Jesus is placed in his tomb for part 2, the resurrection, right? All right, my friends, it was an amazing day. It was interesting to see that as my food walk in some ways, and in my need to just continue to trust in the importance of allowing people to volunteer in our lives, the importance of volunteering when we didn't even expect that God would ask us to do that, and being able to get up again and again. Thanks for letting me reflect. Like if you like, join us if you haven't. Leave comments. I would love to support you. And until we talk again, my friends, best of all, be blessed.